Welcome back, everybody, to Sports Radio 810 WHB's Track Talk with the Racing Boys. I'm Scott Traylor. He is Kirk Elltiot. And joining us in the studio, well, it's probably the biggest legend that we've ever had live in the studio, Big Daddy Don Garlits. How you doing, Big Daddy?
I'm great, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, we appreciate you coming in. And this is a big weekend out at KCIR, a track that's rich in history. And you're bringing a little of that history back with the Muscle Car Reunion.
Yes, I love this KCIR. I've won a lot of races here. This was one of the major stops in the days of the NHRA on the Grand American Series. I raced all of them here. Karen Massini, Shirley Muldowney, Frank Bradley. Great track. And, it's nice to come here with the old cars and cackle them and do all of this fun stuff.
It's great to let the youth of America now, the ones that really weren't around during those times, to come back and kind of reflect back what it was like and the pioneers that made the sport what it is today. And that's important for the young kids to really know the history of NHRA drag racing. Yeah,
I think that's right. And that's why I like to bring an old car out of the museum. Like I've got a car from 1968 here.
That's 12, isn't it?
Pratt 12, that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. And you can see how they were. And this was actually a car we went down the quarter mile and tried to win races with.
Yeah. This weekend, it seems like it's a reunion not only of the nostalgic cars, but the drivers that are there. Roland is there. A lot of different guys. We were at lunch this week out in Independence, and there was a lot of the old-timers that was there. And that's always fun for you, I'm sure, to kind of hook up with those guys and talk about days gone by.
It sure is. I see a lot of my friends that I actually raced that came to the races here in those days that didn't travel all over the country, but they attended this race when we came to town. And then, of course, the fans that come out, and they're all much older now, because we're talking.
Are they faster now than they were back then? You know how the older you get, the faster you become?
Well, yeah. You didn't lose many races.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this weekend at KCIR with the Swamp Rat 12. A little bit of history behind that car. You touched on it just briefly there. Back in and this is the front engine car, and it wasn't long after that you had a big crash in 1970, and thereby led to what we see today, the rear engine dragsters. Talk about that transition there from Swamp Rat 12 to the kind of cars that we see today, and some of the later Swamp Rats you had.
Well, Swamp Rat 12 was an experimental car. We had a 180-inch wheelbase car the year before, and we built this car shorter to go to California where the real good strips were. It didn't work out too well. I came back from the tour in California, and we built a new car, which we called Swamp Rat 12 again because of the contracts. I sold this car to some kids that would put a Chevy in it, and they ran brackets for years until 1976. It got off a drag strip in Florida, bent it up a little bit, brought it over to have it repaired, and at that point I'd started the museum. So I decided I'd be better served to get this car back and restore it, and I built them a new fresh chassis so they were better off too. So then the car sat in the museum storage till 1987, and we pulled it out and we put the new front half on it to restore it, put it back into storage. We didn't put it on display, never put an engine in it. Then in 2007, Chrysler had me build some fuel motors, blown fuel motors, based on the new 5.7 engine like they were building and putting in the Chrysler Chargers and 300s. And so in the project, as it was about 6 months into the project, they said, do you have a car you could put one of these engines in and show it? I said, I sure do. So I pulled 12 out of the building, and we fitted it with this new engine because it originally had a 426 Hemi,
right.
And I've been taking it around to the drags and running it and testing it and doing burnouts with it and then taking it apart and evaluating it. The thing is holding up really good. It's incredible. It's a fine engine. It's not a big engine. It's only about 360 cubic inches, but it's a real durable engine. Last time I took it apart, it was just like it was brand new.
Yeah. How's things going with the museum? I've been down there. It's been a few years. I know you've expanded since probably the last time I was down there is about 10 or 12 years ago. Tell us about the museum and some of the cars that are in the museum, because it's one of those things that, you can walk through there, but you really, you want to take your time when you're looking at these cars, at the engineering and the things that were going on with these cars in the time.
Yeah, the Drag Racing Museum really traces the history all the way back to the beginning of drag racing back in the 40s. We have the first dragster that was called a rail. It came from California. The old man had kept it, never got rid of it, and so we got it. Dick Kraft, he was in Hot Rod magazine. A lot of stuff was about him. He is like the father of the rail. He's the guy that took the roadster body off, and they said, "Well, this is nothing but a rail." And they've been called rails ever since. Yeah. We have that car. And then, of course, we have the modern cars. We have the Shirley Muldowney car that she took the last ride in. And, of course, all of my cars are there, with the exception of a few that we have loaned to other museums. We're open every day except Christmas, 9 to 5, and there's a lot of cars. There's about 300 cars on display. So we recommend that if you come, you allow yourself 3 or 4 hours to enjoy yourself. Don't come late in the afternoon.
Right.
I want to get your thoughts. We saw quite a bit of you on Monday at O'Reilly Raceway Park. Tony Schumacher tied your record of 8 top fuel championships at the U.S. Nationals, but what a day of drag racing. It was surely compelling TV. That is for certain. What was it like from your end? You were right down in the middle of all that. It was quite a day of drag racing, wasn't it?
It was. I was very excited to be there. I have the greatest respect for Tony Schumacher. He's one of the finest young men I've ever met. Of course, I knew his dad. I liked him too, Don Schumacher.
Good people, yeah.
They're good people. He's put a lot of money into the sport, and he's done a good job. Tony's doing a tremendous job for the Army and for recruiting. And the car runs good, and everybody said, when Alan Johnson went away and formed his own team, that would be the end of them. It wasn't the end of them. They're still just as good as they ever were. The money helps a lot. There's no question about that. Yeah. But Tony's a really good driver, and then Green is a tremendous crew chief. So then of course, the Force episode and all the stuff surrounding that. But I say this, Force. I don't care how many cars he has. It's not against the rules.
Right.
It's up to NHRA. If they don't like that, it's up to them to say that you can only have 1 car, 2 cars. But if you've got 4 cars and you want to use some for blockers and get other people in and some out, it's your business. It's up to the competitors to outrun them. Yeah. Somebody's going to be in the other lane.
You can't really enforce that anyway. How can you read somebody's mind of what he's doing at the starting line anyway?
Other than the telemetry.
Oh, the whole thing is ridiculous. Everybody out there's went out of control at one time or another, has been late on the light. Engines don't start. Engines blow up. Tires spin. Everything happens. Force. He would have been a fool to have outrun
bumped his car out,
height, and put him out of the top 10. That was the thing for him to do. I wouldn't even have went up there. I'd have just wouldn't even went to the line. Just that he made a single.
Yeah, right. Well, Don, was that a little too far for another team to go out there and talk about that publicly, or is that good for the sport? Kirk and I talked about it this week. That that was intriguing television. You couldn't walk away from the TV. You couldn't quit watching it, not only because of obviously what Tony was doing with your record, but also what was going on with the whole controversy. Was that good for the sport, or was it bad for the sport?
I think it was good for the sport.
I think
so the whole thing has been a little bit too mandy-pandy, goody two-shoes, pablum, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Back in the day when we raced out here at KCIR, those drivers went to fisticuffs down at the end if there was something that they didn't like or they didn't think they got treated right. And controversy always was going on in the pits between somebody, and there was nothing wrong with it. The fans loved it. This is very fierce competition. Mm-hmm. These guys don't like one another.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we don't want them to like each other either, do we?
No, we don't. That's what made the Shirley Muldowney Garlits thing so good. We really had a hate going for each other.
Yeah.
And we wanted nothing more than to just outrun the other one every time.
And you yourself were one of the drivers, maybe the pioneer of talking a little bit of smack when the camera was on. You weren't afraid to voice your opinion every time you were asked in front of a camera.
That's exactly right. Of course, NHRA didn't like that, and it was they didn't put me on camera all that much, so I have to be more careful what I say now. But I'm not racing now, so I can be nice.
Now, you